This is Mark Wight. This is the No Place Like Home conference. I hope we didn't scare you off too much with the negativity around the scams. Detective Fritz was giving us a lot of information, a lot of stuff for us to consider. And by the way, that bleeds in a little bit to what we're doing in this session as we talk a little bit about finances and some financial planning, and it's a good way to kind of inoculate us a little bit to some of those scams. I'm thrilled to welcome my friend Dee Childers, who is going to be the facilitator for this discussion. Dee and I go back
many years.
A while. And Dee is a geriatric
Care manager. Correct.
Which means that you see a few seniors. And you are involved in the care industry. And so this will be good. This will be really, really good. So I'm now going to turn it over to Dee. She's going to give you a little bit more about her and what she does, and then take it away.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. And welcome, everybody. I am so pleased to be here with you today and with our presenters. Yes, Dee Childers with Life Changes Elder Care Consulting, and we are the ones that are actually helping families and seniors figure out what the next steps are when Plan A has not worked. And we're going to talk about Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C as we move through today's presentation. But what we're talking about is how to get care, where to find care, what kind of communities are out there. And so we're kind of the hands-on experts that help facilitate that. And I turn to these gentlemen to help make sure that our clients can pay for that care.
That's nice.
And services, and even better, the lifestyle that they want to lead. So that's where we're actually going to start today. We're going to start today with what do people need to be doing in preparing and planning for retirement. But before we get to that, we're going to take a few seconds and introduce each of the three of you. Mark, you've already been introduced a little bit. Is there anything you'd also like to say?
No, I'm thrilled to have Aldo and Leon with us today. And so, hi, I'll be quiet now.
Okay, Aldo Cabrini from Thrivent Financial. Aldo, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and how this even is relevant to you?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Very pleased to be here and share some of the thoughts that I have when I use with my clients. I'm a financial advisor. I specialize in retirement income planning and retirement planning at large. So I hope that through the planning process and working with my clients early enough, I can help maximize the probability of their financial success. In general, I help them achieve a life of fulfillment and hopefully bigger impact if I end up with a surplus. That's my goal. That's what I do when I do financial planning.
Excellent. Thank you. So very customized to the individual and what their goals and desires
Absolutely.
are.
My plans are individually based on their dreams and sometimes their fears and their starting position. They help me get to the context how they got where they are, and I help them get them where they want to go in the future.
Perfect. Right on for this conversation today. So thank you very much, Aldo. And Leon Baker with Academy Mortgage. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Leon.
Well, I'm blessed to be here today, so thank you so much for the invitation. And we enjoy helping people get where they need to go as well. Often that's first-time home buyers, but that's joyful for sure. But one of the things that I enjoy is helping people get out of debt. I think that's super important, and the amount of cash flow that you can build by doing that can help you either invest in your future or crush your mortgage. And so those are conversations we typically have. I've been writing loans since 1996, and I love working at Academy Mortgage. It's been a great platform, and have a team of 5 different individuals. So we are blessed to work together every day, and it's a pleasure to come alongside those that are trying to accomplish things and see what we can do to provide great solutions.
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, I think this is going to be a very dynamic conversation. I look forward to hearing all of your ideas and suggestions. And so, today we're talking about thinking ahead about retirement and planning to be in a position to better able to live the life we want. But how do our listeners even start this process?
Well, that's a good one. I think Aldo ought to take that because that's something he does a lot of.
But a year ago, we ran a survey that found out about 70% of Americans don't have a plan, and they don't know what their long-term plan might even be. So it actually starts with awareness and the importance of having a plan so that they can start taking the appropriate actions. When I have an engagement with a client, usually they come to me because they realize they need help. They need professional help. The problem is most people don't start that process to begin with, and so then they end up not having enough action steps or time to prepare for what might be coming in the future. So my goal in general is to create some education, to create some awareness of the importance of getting the right amount of people, the right professionals, the family members to create a plan that works for them. So we can have the time to explore the options and then the costs associated with achieving those options. That's how I start my conversation. You usually start with a conversation. And I notice that most often than not, it's when my clients see their parents going through certain life decisions, that's when their awareness starts being raised. What will happen to me if I ended up in this situation? I wish those conversations started much sooner, when people are younger and they have a lot of time, than when they might be just getting almost ready to have to take an action and they don't have the plan in place.
Well, and it seems like a core part of that, it's not only just how do we afford the plan, but even thinking about what is the plan. And I know I've kind of done a little bit of that myself. And so I assume that some of the questions that you're asking your clients or the folks that you're speaking to is, what does that life look like for you?
Indeed, that's the first question. What is your strategy? What is your plan? Do you have a plan? That's probably even better. Do you even have a plan?
Oh, yeah, the plan is. I can tell you what the plan is. Social Security will be enough. If not, the kids will help out. And then one day, I'll just die in my sleep.
I usually ask them, did you ask your kids about this?
Uh,
And the answer usually, no.
No, they don't know yet.
Yeah.
I'm saving that. I'll talk to them.
So I'm wondering, Aldo, do you give them homework to go away and think about? Like, a lot of people talk about wanting to travel or travel the world or buy that RV and travel in around all of the United States and the national parks, or just to be available to be with all their grandchildren. Do you start at that level about what are your goals? How do you vision your life?
I actually, by definition, as a planner, I will put constraint on my clients, and I don't want them to start with constraints in their mind. So I actually like to ask them, what do you dream your future should be looking like? So I want them to be thinking unconstrained. Really, if they had the perfect retirement for a very long life, what would that look like? Travel, volunteering, activity, children, legacy planning. I like them to think as broad as possible so that we really know what the blue sky is. I will help them then get from where they are to see what they can achieve or what it would take to maximize the probability of achieving their goals. I don't want them to start putting self-imposed constraint. That would be limiting. I know how to do that for them if it's necessary.
Right. Mark or Leon, any other ideas there about, from your perspective, how do people start this process?
What I like about what you and Aldo were talking about is the help in getting them to see the future. We work with people usually a little later who still don't have a vision. I mean, they can't see what this looks like. And Aldo said 70% of the people don't have a plan. Well, they don't have one that they've done. There's a plan there. It's not a very good one. And so there's stuff that will happen in spite of what they really would have liked. And so I think it takes some help to sit down and visualize it and put words to it, right? To say it, to speak it.
Verbalize it. to speaking. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I liked what your discussion was there.
Yeah. From my end, the geriatric care management piece of it, what I periodically see is people retire and have no plan and no place that they're headed. And depression sets in because so much of who we are is built into our careers. And if we've not done this kind of planning, if we've not thought about what do we want it, is playing golf every day part of our dream?
We have a story about that.
Okay.
About a client
Yes.
who was so excited to retire.
Yes.
We'd seen him a couple of 3 years. We have a maintenance program, if you will. They came in every year, and he loved to play golf. He was out there. He would run the battery down in the cart because he played golf so much, and he could not wait to retire because then he would play golf all day, every day. And so he did. We didn't see him actually for a couple of years. I ran into him, I think, as a greeter at Walmart. And I knew that they had done a good job planning. He didn't need to be there as far financially, but I said, well, what happened to the golf? He said, don't talk to me about golf. When golf became the thing to do instead of the distraction or, recreation, he lost a lot of the drive or the passion for golf. Mm-hmm. And so he was looking for something to do. He says, and so I got this, I come here, and he says it's very entertaining. But I just thought that was interesting. His vision was, this is what I'm going to do. Right. And you know what? No reality check. He didn't have somebody going, are you sure? The guys that do that, they get paid to do that. He'd done it for like 2 years, and then he was done.
So another suggestion I have is if that's what you envision, why don't you try before you actually have to do it?
Good.
Maybe you go into part-time mode for 6 months and play golf all day, and then see whether that's something that you really want to do for the rest of your life.
I like that.
Usually that gives them a sense of thinking about, is that really what I want to do? I think purpose is very important in retirement. I had a client last night, we met, he's still working, and the reason why is because his job has his purpose, and he can see that if he's going to financial independence retirement mode, he might not have the same purpose. And so he's still trying to figure out what to do then, and then he will make the call, whether it's not financially, but from a being able to be a contribution to society, that's the right decision for him or not.
Absolutely.
I had one other, if I can.
Yeah, of
one
course,
other.
Mark.
Had a couple come in. We were doing planning for them, and they had retired. He got bought out of his company and was doing okay, but he went back to work. And I said, well, that's really interesting. And she goes, no, it's not. He followed me around every day. Everything I did, there he was. He was worse than a dog because he was always there. I finally told him, you got to get a job and get out of the house. And I was laughing. I was going, oh my gosh. And how many think that, right? That I'm just going to be at the house. It'll be the wife and I, and it's going to be good. And either they didn't check in with their spouse, or they just assumed that the spouse was going to be excited as they are.
Right, right. So really the idea of having purpose and tying it also back to what our personal values are, and figuring out that, well, one of the things that I really like to do is to give back, whether it be through my work or through volunteer, and that it does seem that a lot of folks, as they kind of make their way through this process, might work their way into volunteering, but it's not always intentional. And so that's why the first part of all of this is sitting down with somebody that has some education and training around retirement planning is so important. There's actually books out there written on this. We don't have to fall into this accidentally. We can be purposeful and planful in retirement. And I think it then makes an easier transition where we don't have this depression and this lack of self-identity, so that we do become the puppy, whether it be the husband to the wife or the wife to the husband. Puppies are good for a little while, but we all need breaks from puppies because they take a lot of energy, right?
Especially if
So-
they're a golden retriever, about 6 years old. I'm just saying.
Yes, yeah, yeah. So, Mark, some of the other things about planning for retirement legally, I'm sure you've covered this in some other areas, but this is so important, and I find that so many people don't do this. What are some of the things that they need to be thinking about legally in planning for retirement?
Well, retirement is a nice, mark. This is on the wall, this is going to happen, and that's great, and they should do it then. They could be doing it sooner. It would be great.
It would be much better.
I don't know if they need to do it as soon as what Aldo's talking about, and then getting younger people into a house. But it would be good for them to make some decisions about who's going to make decisions for them if it happens, something happens and they're not able to. So what does that look like? Well, in a strong estate plan, you're going to have things like a financial power of attorney. So if I'm incapacitated, somebody can make financial decisions on my behalf, and that can happen if I don't do it. It's the default plan, and that would be a conservatorship over at court, which gets very expensive and is just painful, by the way. So a financial power of attorney, a healthcare power of attorney, and I know you run into that one a lot.
A lot.
Who can make decisions? If not, again, we're going down to the court. Judge Beater does a good job and all that. But you can avoid that, at least for your family, if you do that now. You sit down and go, I want Joanne to make those decisions for me should something happen. And if she can't do it, then I want Jency, that's our oldest daughter. And that is something that can avoid a lot of issues. And I know you see it probably more than I do on that end of it, making those decisions. A will and or a trust, those are the tools that allow us to make decisions about, at my death, who's going to jump in and, make sure that this all happens. How do I want things to roll out, whether it's to my kids or not to my kids, or if we don't have kids, to a particular charity or some other organization, or nieces and nephews. It's endless. There's so many different things that they can do. And so those are great things to have in place, so that if it doesn't go the way we have it in our head and something happens, then we've got this structured. If you want to get a little bit deeper, a well-designed, implemented trust might keep you out of probate. Some people, that's a high value, right? That's not for everybody, but so this is a conversation. It does very much the same thing as the will, in that we've chosen who and when and what they do. And some of us like to have a little more control, so we're on top of that. Again, something looking down the road, and probably like Aldo will tell us, is something that needs to be reviewed from time to time. It's like life happens.
Right.
Is that the John Lennon thing?
Yes.
Life happens while we're making other plans. Yeah.
And that was one of my points was that we have to review all of this information periodically. And I know there's the 5 Ds, and I won't remember all of them, but it seems like retirement, we talk about death and decade birthday and divorce and whatever the other 2 are. So perhaps you can help me with them, because I'm not remembering.
Disability.
Disability.
Is one.
Right.
But retirement is, and people don't realize how big a deal it is.
Yes.
Right? We get all worked up about buying a house, and then we change houses, right?
We do.
Yeah, we buy this house, and then life goes on, and we're kind of open to that. But it seems like, no, I got my financial plan in place, that's it. Set it, forget it, and it doesn't work that
You
way.
know, the plan is as good only as of today. Life happened tomorrow. The plan has to change. Indeed.
Right, right. So agility and having a team of professional experts in your back pocket to be able to work with and to do regular checkups. I'm assuming that you each do kind of checkups with your clients as the years go by. There's touch points to kind of see how things are going and what's changed. Is that,
Well, and right now, Leon, interest rates are changing.
They have changed a little bit, I've noticed.
Well, and over time, you're able to help people out when the interest rates, hopefully they'll come back down. But when they come back down, that's another touch point.
Yeah, well, even now, it's kind of interesting. I did a report just last week about interest rates going basically doubling and a little bit more. And it was interesting to find out that inflation has increased as well. Well, we're paying higher rates, but wages are up. And it's almost even, to be honest.
Oh.
It's really interesting when comparing 2019 and 2022. So I'm kind of optimistic about that right now because for those people that do want to move up, those homes are on sale. And so this is actually a very good time to buy in that regard because you're paying less for a home, but a higher rate. They kind of balance each other out, especially when you include higher income. So that's kind of an interesting trend that we're looking at right now and trying to talk about a little bit. But yeah, people have motivations to move up in different periods of time in their life for a variety of reasons. Maybe their family's gonna come live with them. Mom and dad need a place to be, and so we need more space. Or we want an ADU now, an accessory dwelling unit. Or maybe we have more kids than we ever thought we would, or whatever.
ADU?
An ADU.
What is
That's
that?
an accessory dwelling unit. So that could be like an attached. Some homes are being built now with
Mother-in-law
mother-in-law
quarters.
quarters.
What we
Yeah.
used to call-
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's
All
right. Same thing. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
no, you,
Are we seeing more of those right now?
Yeah, that's a really popular thing right now, especially with the VRBO market, Airbnbs. People are like, oh, if I got a shop I can convert into some sort of a living quarters, it becomes a way to generate income. And some people are open to managing that and like it, and other people don't want to consider
Shouldn't.
that. But
Some people should.
yeah,
Shouldn't.
some shouldn't, but it is a way to generate extra income to help with your mortgage payment or to help your retirement planning.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that kicks back into some retirement planning, and now it becomes a plan, maybe their first plan.
right.
And I'm guessing we should visit with the expert, or they should visit with the expert about whether or not that's a good plan for them.
Right.
It depends.
Yeah.
It really depends. My answer is
Point.
generally it depends. Every situation is very subjective. What are the plans for legacy? Is this your final home? Is this forever home? That's important. But usually that's a big asset. And so when there's an asset there, there's options that come along with that.
Right.
What's your personal cash situation? Are you house rich and cash poor or not? So that will drive then potential decisions of what to do with that property.
Yeah, it seems so many folks are fixated on staying in their current home. As I drive by I love my current home, I love my yard, but I look at it and I go, I cannot wait to downsize. I do not want any more yard responsibilities. And so then, as you said, there's a lot of money in that house. And so, is that something that you would work through with them to help them figure out, do we take a mortgage at this point in time, at this stage of life? Or are you guys working together? How would we figure that out when we're making perhaps downsizing into something that's instead of going up?
Right sizing.
Right sizing.
Right
Thank you. Excellent. Right sizing.
Well, staying in your home, whether that's the one that you have or a right size one, it's actually very important. It's proven to be beneficial, not just financially, socially, emotionally. It's comfort. You're in your personal situation. Most people would want to stay there if they can, instead of being elsewhere, in a community elsewhere where they don't have familiar faces or familiar things around them. So it's important. So that's part of the conversation to have and asking what and where do you see, especially if a situation where you do need help and extended care might be in a potential. The number says 70% of us will eventually end up with a long-term care event of some sort, which then might need support.
Right.
Would being in your own home better for healing and for general well-being versus going elsewhere? And then the home becomes, okay, how do we treat this to make sure that fulfill the best possible path? In general, you can even change your homes. You can make some modifications to make it better livable situations, and that could be potentially a better choice than having to spend money elsewhere in a community where potentially the cost is significantly higher.
Right, right. So, yes, I just met with a woman last week, actually, who'd put an elevator in her home, first one that I'd seen that actually was installed. And so price point for elevators have come way down. So we've always had that chair that rides up and down the stairs, which has been very useful and very effective. But yes, there's the modifications to home.
What did it cost?
I didn't ask.
Oh, I want
that was our
to know.
first meeting.
I want to know about that. But there are options with a house, right?
There's lots of options with a home. When I initially speak with people, my end goal is how can I help you be debt free in your home? Like generally people have a lot of debt, and I don't know, I would say people today have less debt than they did before 2008. I would say that's probably true. I would say that.
Okay.
And so I think people are more financially responsible than they've been in the past, but they still have a car, truck, maybe some student loans, maybe some credit cards, whatever else. So if we're leaving home A and going to home B, my initial goal is to wipe out all of their debt with their proceeds from the sale of their current home and go into their next home with a much more tolerable number when they look at their monthly budget, because creating cash flow is a really, really big deal. Especially when it comes to paying off a mortgage, if that's your goal, or to be able to do something else with that. But ultimately, the conversations I have a lot to do with how do we not spend more than we earn, and how can we take this massive amount of debt or a moderate amount of debt and get rid of it permanently. But hopefully then let's not get back in, because we're headed here. And so if we can get the blinders on and help people see that you actually can retire as opposed to just throwing in the towel, like it actually doesn't take that much more. Or maybe we want to retire in 10 years. So if you pay this on your mortgage, you'll be out of debt in 10 years and set yourself up nicely. Because if you don't owe anybody any money, it doesn't take too much money to retire,
Right.
is the idea.
So being planful, once again, being
Yes.
planful is key. Not
Yes.
only where we want to go, but how we're going to get there.
Yes.
Why
And then-
is that so hard? Aldo, why is that so hard for people to plan?
Why is it so hard for people to plan?
I mean, you said 70% of us don't have our intentional plan. We're going to borrow from someone else, like the government.
I think at the end is looking at the future and thinking about the future is so much more difficult than what you have this coming weekend. And it's just what's the easiest path to pick? Thinking about the future is just it's just complex in nature, and people don't tend. But I know what I'm going to do today or this weekend. I'm going to spend a lot of time on doing that. Realistically, sometimes people think more about their weekend than when to take Social Security, which carries hundreds of thousands of dollars difference
Yes.
a year versus another year. Believe it or not, that's what human beings do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
Oh, we see that, and so do you. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. But it is hard out there, right? Like, it's hard to survive. And I think survivability is always going to be our first key. And if we have something left over, then it seems like, wow, I should reward myself for surviving that or whatever. It's hard to pick our eyes up and go, okay, what about tomorrow? Because, days are hard for people. It is difficult out there in a lot of ways. That said, people are making more money than they've ever made. And I think that we take that margin and use it in the wrong place sometimes. So that's why having that in mind and having awareness of what we need to do can be so helpful as you move forward.
Right. Yes. Because, yes, if you don't have a plan, any road will get you there. Right? And if you don't know where you're going,
Any RV will get you there.
that's right. But even RVs are very expensive.
Oh my God.
And, to plan for that. And taking the time to sit down and think about what you want your life to be like. And we know we all like to think optimally how it's going to work, but then when plan B happens, when things don't go quite like we thought they were going to go, there's a health event, maybe fairly quickly recoverable or maybe not, and things have to change. Then looking at, is it best to stay in our home? 24-hour care is pretty expensive.
Wow, is it ever? I have a client right now, we're looking at doing a reverse mortgage for them. That's a very, very helpful tool for a lot of people. This particular lady is 99 years old, and she is determined to stay in her home, which I can't fault her for. I tell my parents, hey, you've earned the right to live your life however you want to live your life. That's great. We'll see what we can do to help, right? But her son is helping her manage this, and he's telling me it's $34 an hour, 24 hours a day, and that works out to $16,300 a month or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So we're looking at pulling out $16,000 a month in a reverse mortgage to help her cover her care, right? It's very expensive.
Yeah,
It's very
but at
expensive.
99, that's different than at 83.
For sure.
Right. Or 70.
Or, yeah.
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 Yeah, those are all very different. But
Right.
here she is at 99, her home's free and clear, and she wants to stay. So I was like, okay,
Right.
you can do it.
And that's wonderful that she's able to do that. And that needs to be part of the plan, is that we need to be thinking about if Plan A doesn't go perfectly, then we need to be able to shift into Plan B. And so are you having, Aldo, are you having conversations like that with clients too about how do we look at alternative situations that might occur and plan for those as well?
Yeah, I mentioned living at home, aging at home in place carries emotional, social benefits, healing benefits. It does carry potentially, other than 24 hours care, cost benefits as well versus being in a different location. It does carry sometimes, though, issues, challenges. Light housekeeping task, being able to access cupboards, transportation, could be an issue. Companionship, what if you're alone? Issues of that sort. So being outside of the home, especially if you're single, might actually be beneficial for other purposes. That means, though, that you need to start considering what would be the cost. And I see my clients, they move to independent living, probably the first step if they're outside of the home, and potentially then there's a little bit of an escalation. Then if they have a health problem and need medical skills, then it goes into assisted living and even beyond. Or unfortunately, and I have a very close relative of mine, what if you start having cognitive decline, mental decline? Alzheimer's care, 24 hours, dementia, it's very expensive. Either in home or outside. And if that happens, I know that is usually a significant financial torpedo. Especially if you're healthy, having 1,000, 10,000 sometime of expenses a month for decades, 10 years, 15, 20 years, is not something that everyone can afford out of pocket. And so that's when, if that were to happen, you need to have a plan in place before that situation happens. You need to start exploring, how do I transfer this risk if I cannot afford it out of pocket? And frankly, I have to be honest, even the people that can afford it out of pocket, I sometimes suggest that they have proper option discussed. It's sad to say, but when I meet with clients, I can see that, let's not put dad in that community, because every time we spend an extra dollar on dad, it's a less of a dollar that we're going to get in our inheritance.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, money does make people greedy. And so when I have a client that
I
can
think they're
afford,
greedy already.
they could probably plan for that before.
Oh, there you go.
And so then the client themselves says, I'm going to set myself up for success at the time that I might not be able to make those decisions, but I could have afforded.
Yeah.
But now someone else is making those decisions for me, and it might not be my best interest.
Right.
That's a sad situation, but that's reality.
It is all too often and very unfortunate, and why I always feel so strongly that that review of the financial power of attorney needs to be done with an attorney. Yes, you can get them online, but you cannot get the wisdom and the insight from the web that you can get from a good attorney to sit and have those questions.
And unfortunately, I have stories.
Yes, well, please
You
tell
always
us
have
one.
stories.
We love stories.
Well, I've seen this a handful of times. We've been very
At least.
fortunate we've been fortunate with our clientele. We screen them pretty hard, but we have seen that very situation. And the first thing that we do is that child is no longer in the conference room as we're talking through the planning. When they say my money or our money,
My inheritance.
and they use that term, my inheritance, we had a gentleman, 4 sisters, he was the boy, and he had $1,500 boots on, he's just, that's the way he came across, and he said that. Well, this will be our money. And the sisters, of course, were livid. And I kicked him out. I said, no, we're not going to have this conversation. So that's something that you need to pay attention to. And so let me tell you a story. They didn't have a power of attorney. It was a little bit worse. Mom just put her daughter's name on everything. On the checking account, on the house, and a few other things. And the daughter did not know this, and the daughter filed for bankruptcy. And at the time, we had a newer bankruptcy trustee who was a bit of a bulldog and was going after everything. That was her job. And so this lady ended up over in the bankruptcy court trying to explain that she meant it, to help, not to give that to her daughter at this time. And that's something we see, 3 or 4 times a week. I've got my son or I got my daughter on the checking account. Right. And so it's like I can listen to Dave Ramsey and I can get my plan, or I can go talk to a professional who can sit down then and we can customize this. And it's really the same issue. I can get a power of attorney offline, and I get that, and I get it mostly from engineers. Although
I'm one of them.
I know you are. I know. But a lot of them, they just know, right? That I can figure this out. And what they don't have, even though they're very bright, they just don't have the experience. They haven't seen where it went wrong. And you and I have both seen where it went wrong. And there was no money in the checking account. We had one gentleman who just borrowed some money from mom, right? He was just borrowing some money. And then he borrowed again. And then when it was time to either bring in some help or go into assisted living, there wasn't enough. And the rest of the family they were just aghast. They just like, well, what happened to the money? And then he had to come clean, and that is not a fun conversation to have. And it did happen in my conference room, and we talked about criminal action, and said, well, wait a minute, you're in a position, you have a fiduciary responsibility. And if you breach that, you can be criminally liable for that. And finally, at that point, we got his attention because he thought he was stealing from himself or his sister. I mean, borrowing.
He was borrowing.
Borrowing.
Yeah.
When in fact, he was completely in control. And we've had
It's been a busy day.
sirens going back all morning. Interesting. So that was, we could do more stories, but that's the issue, right? And I can't be careful. I can't help them if they do it themselves.
Right.
And we'll talk about this in a little bit. There are some things then, if they do it themselves, that they absolutely can't do that would make their life better. And so that's another reason why. And there are other attorneys that don't do elder law, and so they don't understand. But when you get to a certain point in your life, you really need to talk to an elder law attorney who can put some provisions in there that can make their life better. So from nothing to something to maybe something even better.
Right. That's very important. And I can't stress that enough. I agree with you 100%. Having a good elder law attorney, having a good financial advisor, having other key financial people on your team just makes the world of difference, so that you have people to bounce ideas off of and expertise that is credible. To have that kind of fiduciary responsibility makes a world of difference. So, Leon, you mentioned the utilizing of a reverse mortgage potentially to do some of this. There's a lot of people don't understand what a reverse mortgage is. Could you just kind of break that down for us a little bit so people might have a sense of what that is instead of just being afraid of it? I mean, I have to admit that for quite a while I had heard reverse mortgages all bad. And now that I have more information, reverse mortgages are not only not all bad, there can be a lot of great there. And I'm just wondering, could you share a little bit of information with us about that?
A reverse mortgage, I guess I'll say, kind of made us come up with the name forward mortgage. A traditional mortgage, you're going forward. By that, I'm saying you're paying down how much you owe every month with each payment, the principal reduction portion. And a reverse mortgage does the opposite of that, so it goes in reverse. So you start out with a balance, maybe it's zero, maybe it's some other number, and it climbs every month. And so it's called a reverse mortgage for that reason. When I use it for my clients, I try to just get rid of their mortgage payment. Now, you have to cover your own taxes and insurance in most cases. There's a little asterisk to that. But generally speaking, if you get rid of the principal and interest portion of their payment, then that can be a really significant improvement in their monthly budget. I'll have clients come in, they're like, hey, I just need to save $100. What can I do to lighten my budget load a little bit? And I'm like, well, we could get rid of all of your mortgage payment if you'd like to. And that is a real head turner. Typically, the first hesitation to that conversation is, well, but wait a minute, what am I going to have to give to my kids? And they're concerned that their kids might be upset with them, going to this same point about, well, that's my inheritance, though. And so I follow that by asking, well, how much is your kids willing to pay to help support your mortgage payment every month? Because that doesn't go very far, very fast. And then you kind of get the idea, it's like, well, we'll work this out, and there's going to be some things left over. And so the next conversation usually comes around, well, the bank owns the house at that point, right? But really a reverse mortgage is just like any other mortgage. You have a lien against your home, it has a balance, and you get a payoff for it at some point, whether you sell it or refinance it to something else, or if you pass. And so where a reverse mortgage is superior is that the bank doesn't own the house, just like they would on a traditional mortgage, but you do have some decisions to make after the passing of the last borrower. And so we'll make the scenario that, I owe this much, but my home is worth this much. Well, then the estate would have an opportunity to say within 30 days, that we want to go ahead and sell the house and capture that equity difference. And then you have 6 months to execute that. And if you're executing that and it hasn't happened yet, you haven't sold the home for whatever reason, you can get a 90-day extension to that, and another 90-day extension to that. So you do have a fair amount of time, but they want you to be proactive about that. So in this situation, your estate can capture that equity difference. If the amount owed and the value of the home are the same, then your estate has the option to buy the home at 95% of the current value. So that's nice. If a family member wants to keep grandma's house or whatever it might be, that's a nice option. But in the case that everyone is hoping doesn't happen, is we owe more than the home is worth if you have the time it that way. And that can happen. And so reverse mortgages have mortgage insurance. And so the estate is not bound to cover that difference. You just recognize, oh, we owe more than it's worth, and you send it back to the bank. And so the estate doesn't have a liability in that way. So you go from having a mortgage payment that is really difficult to keep up with. Social Security is not keeping up with inflation these days.
Oh, no. Didn't I just get a letter? That said Social Security was I just saw something.
I'm so sorry. I was speaking out of turn then. I didn't realize that everything's actually fine.
Just now they did a cost of living increase.
Right.
I'm sure it's like, half of a
commensurate
percent or
with
something like that. But
well, some people are finding that their expenses have exceeded their income.
Yes.
And for them, getting rid of a mortgage payment is really beneficial. Like 2 tiers beneficial sometimes, right? Because it's a great solution. So that can really be a nice benefit for people in Plan B to help them navigate, what am I going to do? It's really a great product. It's not the perfect product for everybody, but it is really helpful for many that are in that 70% group that's like, now what am I going to do? I have a house, I have a bunch of equity, but I don't know how to solve this.
Right. How do I get access to that?
Yes, exactly.
Yes, without having to sell my home and move out.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
get to stay in place.
Yes.
And utilize your assets there. So it seems like pretty much a win-win there.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it can be.
Yeah.
Everything has, there's two sides to every coin, but this one has a lot on one side for some people.
Excellent. Thank you very much for
Yeah,
that
you're welcome.
explanation. Yes. Yes, Mark?
We used one for clients where they had just refinanced their place. Lowered their payment, they had a lower interest rate, and he had a stroke. And so was headed to assisted living. Now they had basically two budgets that they had to finance. And they got really close, but just couldn't make it. The reverse mortgage allowed her to stay in her home, like Aldo was suggesting. That has huge emotional impact. It allowed her to stay in her home, and they could use other funds then to pay for his care. So for me, and ever since then, it was a brilliant tool. And I know they've gotten a little bit more, they've gotten better, a little bit more involved. And I like what you said, that they're not for everybody. I get that. But it's a nice tool to have in the toolbox,
Right.
right? I have tools. Aldo has tools. You've got tools. This is just one of the tools in the toolbox.
Right. Absolutely. So having people and their tools is really important.
Well, I know you
gotta have a
wanted to
team.
say that we're all tools. I know that's what you wanted to say.
Wow.
Well, let me reframe that, Mark. Thank you. It's good to have a team,
Well,
and you are team members.
well, and that's the thing about the toolbox, right?
Yeah,
If they
right.
go to Aldo and he
Yeah.
understands their vision, then he can go over to that big toolbox and start. Okay,
Right.
that's the first drawer over here in this section. My brother has this huge honking toolbox. Actually, he's got two of them. I've got a very small one because that's not my thing. Anyhow, but great tools, great tools, great tools, great tools.
Right.
But not everybody knows how to use the tool.
Right. Yes.
And there's a lot of miseducation about what is available or not.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
a lot, your perception, the past perception actually is still lingering.
Yes.
So back to awareness and the importance of planning and engaging with professional. The reverse mortgage in general is not a simple tool. You need to describe it. Actually, to the point that a potential client has to go to a class before they sign on the dotted
Right.
line to understand what they're signing, right? They don't require that for mortgage necessarily. But once people understand and the clients understand how valuable that could be,
Right.
they can absolutely see how important it is. It's one of the steps, not for everyone, where if everything else does not work, that actually might happen.
Right.
Especially in time when the market is down and they would have to access funds from maybe a depressed portfolio, they might actually be able to extract equity from a home at that time without impacting their portfolio and let the market then do its thing and recover. That's potentially very, and some of that can be very useful.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yes, and the idea of being able to keep the spouse at home, the spouse that doesn't need to move to community, that doesn't need that, because that is so important. That safety and that stability really makes a huge difference.
Well, for example, if it's a memory care community, well, what's the other spouse going to do in there?
Right.
I've seen assisted living communities where, you can buy up a little bit and the spouse can be there as well. I've seen that work really well. No, it's not for everybody again. So,
Right. Right.
Aldo used my favorite attorney line. Well, it depends, right? And it depends. And so that's not for everybody, but I have seen that work well. And maybe even in spite of our best planning, right? Stuff happens. Life happens. And I could see, and I've had this situation where I had the little lady existing on Social Security. And existing is not living, but existing on Social Security. I've had a couple of situations. I had one lady that had $250,000 sitting in a CD.
Oh, my.
And of course, at certain times you're going backwards, right? You're giving money away by having it in a CD. And she was, eating crackers and, processed cheese. And I don't know what she was eating, but not much. But that was not her money. So talk about the opposite, right? The opposite is that's my money. Now this is mom going, oh, no, I can't touch that. That's for the kids. Right. I had one daughter she wanted to swat her mom. Mom, that's for you.
Right.
And then I've also had in the large home, mortgage is paid off. So this was a very big part of their portfolio is this asset. And she was hanging on to it for the kids. Instead of having access to more resources.
And having
And
a
then-
quality of life.
Yeah. And the reality is, most kids, if not all kids, I cannot say all, at the end of life of parents, most likely will sell the
Right.
property
Yeah.
and take the equity.
We
Might as well just let the parents use the equity for themselves and enjoy their retirement
Right.
instead of transferring something, an asset that the kids might not like anyway.
I've had that phone call.
Yeah.
I said, okay, well, let's talk to your son. She's hanging on to the house. It was a nice home. At one point, it was really nice. And she says, well, I'm hanging on to this for my son. I called the son, lives in Chicago. I say, I'm here with your mom. Hi, whatever his name was. And we're just talking. She wants to hang on to the house, and she's keeping it for you. I don't want it. I'm never moving back to Boise. I've loved that house, but Mom, you got to sell it. It was like 4,500 square feet. It's older. There's the maintenance, right? So it needs a roof, with the old big trees. And he was he was a bit irate because what was he going to do? He was going to sell it.
So this is kind of another part of this whole topic is this communication piece with the next generation about goals and objectives, not only about what you want and what kind of life you'd like to have, but also some input from them. So goals and expectations. I think expectations are the other piece about that, because it is not uncommon to hear that, oh, my kids will take care of me. I don't need to save for community. I don't need to save for someone else to come in because my kids will take care of. You guys run across this ever?
I actually have a specific line of questioning regarding having heart-to-heart conversation. I usually suggest that holidays is when parents and children get together, and starting those difficult conversations might be beneficial. Someone has to start somewhere. It's either the children asking questions about their parents and what they see, or vice versa, parents initiating the conversation. It's probably one of the very first steps of just starting a conversation actually lead to good result, good planning, next steps. Not having the conversation will just create a lack of clarity in both parties. Children, I wonder if my parents will be okay, what they will do, and so just getting what they want.
Yeah.
So starting that is important, and usually it's around dinner table. It's usually the easiest thing. It doesn't have to start very deep, very emotional, but just starting the conversation will be going a long way.
Right.
Absolutely.
My parents are amazing. I love them, love them, love them. And so we've had a conversation in our family. My sister would like to take care of them, and so that's fantastic. We'll help and everything. But my mom handed everybody a set of stickers one day and said to put a sticker under anything that you had in the house that you wanted when she was to pass. And I just handed them back to her. I was like, I don't really want anything, Mom.
Right.
And it was totally different than what she expected, obviously, right?
Well,
so I
and
think that's important.
That's a generational thing, I think, that's happened with the next generations down there. They're not into the collectibles that maybe we and or our parents, certainly prior generations. So that has been a shift, and it's been a big aha, I think, to anybody that has those conversations now. So kudos to you for just being upfront and not placating Mom, and just being real clear. That's not, stuff isn't what I want. Quality time with you is what I want, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Dad got I think a little miffed because there was a time they were trying to downsize and get rid of stuff, and every time we'd come to visit, we had to take something. And I think it was difficult for him because we did not value the same things that he valued. And so we would come, and then we would go, and it would still be, had a table set up, and down in the study. Oh my goodness. And I just was like, oh, do I take it just 'cause? Right? Should I take it and haul it back to Boise? They were down south of Salt Lake, and so do I take it up and then do something? It was a real issue for me, and I found out later. For all the kids, we were all like, "No, we don't need that."
Yeah. The amount of silver I've given away since both my
there you go.
parents have passed, the silver tea tray or the silver teapot and the tray and the cups. And it's like, oh my Lord, and you can't even give it away. I mean, nobody wants it because it's not a commodity that people are interested in anymore. And yet it was highly valued.
Well, clearly we failed our children because they're not into those types of things.
Yes. Put an electronic chip in it and we'll get a different
Oh, there you
story.
go. Yeah, there's another way to go on this. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the other thing then about needing care and having conversations, it's so wonderful that your sister has volunteered and said, yes, I'll help. I mean, that's actually, I live with my sister, and I've lived with my sister for 10 years, bless her heart. She quit her job, sold her house, and moved to Boise when our mom moved to Boise, and now I had both parents here. So, a healthy family system is really nice when it works that way. The other sister lives in Idaho Falls, and we were hands-on all the time. And I'm wondering, do you have any advice for families in kind of navigating that? Because fair doesn't always mean equal. How do families prepare to do that, knowing that somebody's going to step up if that's the case?
Or believing that someone's going to step up. One of the things that we've seen in those situations, though, is, and forgive me again for being somewhat sexist in this, but it's usually the oldest daughter that kind of steps up.
Yep.
And she can't do it right. Well, especially for the out-of-town kids who fly in or drive up.
Seagulls.
They come in for Thanksgiving, and they see mom, and they haven't seen her for a year, and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, mom isn't doing well. What are you doing wrong? Why are you're not doing a good job here? That house isn't staying right. Da 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 da. And I've had that phone call more than once where we got to do something. Da 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 da. And there's two parts to that. To be honest, there are some family members that are not built for doing that, for taking care. And so that's something to pay attention to. And then again, it's the communication, right? It's the clarity.
Right.
The seagull, the one that flies in, looks around and goes, this isn't right, you're not doing a good job. Very often don't take into account what mom wants.
Right.
This is what mom wants. Oh no, this isn't good enough. Well, they moved off, they became very successful, and money is a big thing now for them. And by the way, not that they're really anxious to share that, right? But they're in there going, we got to do a better job. And what's been sad in that situation is the daughter who, and it can be the son, but it's often the daughter. The caregiver is they're working hard, they may have quit their job to provide that care. And so that's a financial impact to them. And they're running around, they're doing the financial stuff for mom, and this may not be where they need daily, assisted care or activities of daily living. It just may be they're older and they need a little help with bank and the groceries and putting them away and making sure that they eat. and there's the socialization, and so the daughter, and she's got her son coming over and mowing the lawn and shoveling the sidewalk. That's a huge financial impact, let alone emotional. And then you have the sister or the brother that jumps in, and we're going to make this right. This is just going to work out differently. Yeah, I think that goes back to the conversation and expectations, and we need mom to be clear and to explain that clearly to the family, not just to the one that's here. And fortunately, I've seen the families that have rallied around that sister and said, what can we do to help?
Right.
And we've seen a lot of that, but we do have...
Right. Well, a lot the other way, too, let's be honest. That's more the exception than the rule, and understanding the toll that it takes, and, setting up some kind of plan to provide sister some relief so that she has quality
Yes.
of life as well, and whether there be compensation up front or not, but some recognition of that along the way, and so that planning piece is another part of that. I think
Yeah,
that's
there's
important.
certainly some math you can do. There's some gives and takes, like, well, you don't have a housing payment anymore, so, excuse me, that's in your favor, but you're spending all this time, so
Right.
those are easy calculations to make, and
Right.
come up with something that works for everybody. It shouldn't be that one party is sacrificing everything, right?
Right. So it's having a conversation. It's like putting it on the table. Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
Let's talk about everybody's expectations, what our goals are. Do we have shared goals? Everybody's is focused on keeping mom and dad in the house, or whatever those goals may be. But we're talking about it.
And if they would listen, up front.
Yes.
Up front,
Right.
not halfway through,
Right.
not on the end.
Although halfway through is better than at the end.
That's true. It's
And it's not only what my goals are. Sometimes it's like, what if
Right.
the worst case scenario happened?
Right.
So even preparing for the worst,
Yeah.
and if it doesn't happen, great, but if it did. So people don't like to talk, sometimes it's morbid,
Yeah.
but preparing for what if that situation happens? What would we do? What are options? How much would it cost? Should we transfer the risk to someone else? What are the implications? Caregiving is a pretty strong decision, and you mentioned sometimes a lot of people are forced to retire, even if they didn't want to, just to take care of a loved one that cannot any longer be alone.
and even if they're not working, there's still an impact to the family, right? If they're providing care throughout the day. We now no longer have mom's taxi, right? The kids are doing something on their own. There's still a financial impact, even if they weren't working full time.
Absolutely. And then also I've seen, and I noticed sometimes the caregiver doesn't want to let go of that control, which then is detriment to their own personal health. It has other implications.
Yeah.
They feel like my loved one is vulnerable. I don't want a stranger coming to our place. I don't want anyone else to help them out. I'm going to do it.
Right.
When in reality, then they need respite. They need some rest. They need to be
Caregiver
able to do
burnout
it,
is
take a break.
huge.
Absolutely.
Huge initiatives around caregiver burnout
So-
right now, because we know.
And then if you have someone coming in, obviously you would have to compensate them.
Right.
And financially, that's another decision. How much would that cost?
Right.
How extensive is that cost? Can we be prepared for that? So thinking about the worst case scenario, sometimes it's good to be prepared ahead of time, or at least you know what the implication would be.
Right. In our remaining time, I'd like to switch to Plan C, which is really worst case scenario. They haven't planned, health deteriorates, need more help. What kind of support? What do we do at that point in time?
Plan C might stand for common, right?
That's excellent. Yes, I think that's a very
I think
good
it happens more
analogy.
maybe more common than it should be, but it is common. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And what resources are available when somebody finds themselves? Clearly looking at that asset, which maybe they hadn't in the past, the house,
Well, I don't know that we always look at the house as an asset, right?
No, they don't.
We don't think in those terms.
Always suggest people to look locally. There's a local resource, maybe municipal resource. If they were in the service, Veterans Affairs might have plans and resources for them. Often people think that long-term care is provided by Medicare.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's usually not the case for an extensive amount of
When
time.
you say a lot of people, it's like in the 90th percentile of people. Oh, they'll
I'm
take
gonna
care of me.
take care of
Oh,
me.
yeah.
Right.
In reality, that's not the case.
No.
After 100 days, that goes away. There's some expectation that people are healing and they're back to their life. So then it becomes a more difficult decisions. And Medicaid, at least here in Idaho, is one of those options. But they're not a five-star hotel. And they might be 100 miles away from your loved one because that's where the bed was. And that's not necessarily the best decision. But sometimes is the unfortunate reality.
Right.
So, Dee, you'll know this, I think, better than we do, but the Medicaid available beds, from what I've seen, is shrinking. That is
Yes.
really contracting.
Absolutely.
Even though our state legislature, for the first time, opened up some funding for Medicaid, the communities, you do want to say facilities sometime when you're talking about Medicaid.
But thank you for really working hard at that communities piece.
Oh, well, I've actually educated some people in the business. I hate it when people call me and say, well, we had to put mom in a facility. I hate that with a
Right.
passion. And then some of the people in the business say, yeah, that's that facility over, and I'm like, I'd like to community. I'm good with community.
Right. Because that's ultimately what it is. It's a community of people. There's so much richness that's there in this community. You're not just being warehoused. You don't have a hook you hang on.
Correct. Although there may have been a time when that was.
But that's a long
I
time
know.
ago at this point.
I know,
Yeah.
I know. So I guess where I wanted to go with that is this thinking that, Medicare will take care of me or the government has a plan, because I think there are people that think that, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, they've always pitched in and took care of us, so they're going to take care of me now. That is not a realistic expectation right now. Medicaid beds are fewer, like you said, and further between. And if you can find one, the cost of entry is up to 2 years of private pay, meaning will allow you to stay in a semi-private room, which means you'll have a roommate, and many folks of that age don't want a roommate. After you private pay for 2 years. Now, 2 years is not magic number. I think the average stay in assisted living now is like 2.4 years. So it's based on you're going to die and we don't have to worry about trying to get, profit out of you. Because face it, Medicaid, what is that, about 55% reimbursement over private pay? Hard to run a business.
Well, they don't. I mean, they don't get to stay in the black with Medicaid beds, so they can only allocate so many in their community that they can afford to make a Medicaid bed. And then, like you said, it's usually a semi-private room. It's a studio. It's not a 2-bedroom, so it's not a 2-bedroom apartment that you each have your own room, literally. And in one community that I can think of, because of the rules that the state has, is that you can't walk through somebody else's bedroom, so they actually had to switch the living room and the bedroom around so that everybody walked through your bedroom and not the actual bedroom, because you were living in the living room if you got a 1-bedroom apartment with 2 people in it.
Right.
But studios are more common. 2 people.
So this is an absolute challenge. It's not. It is not a, oh my gosh, I've got this covered.
No.
This is along the lines of, the kids will take care of me. But sometimes they do.
Yeah.
Sometimes the Medicaid works out. I don't see it. quite frankly, I don't do that much Medicaid planning anymore, because crisis planning anyway, because there's just not the availability. So that is, you got to go back further and avoid the crisis planning if you can. Now, the one that you mentioned that is available and still available is there's a VA pension benefit that's available to our vets if they've served during a war period. Now, they didn't have to be boots on the ground. They didn't have to be, in country. They just needed to be serving prior to the ongoing Mideast conflict. They had to serve 90 days in the military, 1 day of which was during a war period. Mm-hmm. And we had one that was 1 week during a war period, right at the end of World War II. And then they can qualify for, depending on their expenses, up to about $2,300 if they're married, about $13 if they're not. So that's awesome. That's awesome, right? It's in so many ways it's better than Medicaid. I love it. However, if you're on Social Security, if you don't have anything else, if you've sold the house, which is, if they've moved into assisted living, they're going to be forced to sell the house. And all they've got left is say, Social Security and the VA benefit. That's still not a lot of money. I'm sorry, it's just not. And again, this concept of, well, we're going to have a nice 2-bedroom apartment, or even a studio, if you will. That's not going to happen. We have, and these programs are designed so that you're not sleeping in the street.
Right.
That's kind of where it is. It's the safety net, if you will. I cannot recommend that you plan on qualifying for Medicaid or the VA benefit. But people do come and we do some proactive planning, but the idea is we want to preserve some cash assets, so it might be the house that we sell, and we can preserve that while we qualify. Then we might have a little bit extra for the kids to use, not for the kids, but to use to, contribute to and help cover the cost, even if we're using Medicaid or the VA benefit. Not bad planning, but don't pin your hopes on Medicaid, because that isn't going to get any better.
Right.
Well, we can't afford to pay
Right.
our CNAs and the folks working in the communities. We just can't afford it. And so they can't afford, they just can't. Medicaid isn't going to work for them.
Right. It's a very difficult situation when you find a family that has reached that place and you're doing what you can. And like you said, I mean, we have had to look outside of our area, especially if there's a behavioral health issue.
Oh, yeah.
We have no behavioral health units here in Boise.
We haven't for some time.
We have not, and it's been really very distressing when you need that. So northern Idaho, Burley, and Utah, if you can get, again, a bed. So it's a very difficult situation. So you want to be planful here. You want to save for retirement. You want to have a plan for it, to understand what your assets are and how someone that can help you manage all of that and be mindful of that. As we start to look at closing up here, what other things have we not covered today that you would like to share, some thoughts or tips or suggestions with our audience that might be helpful?
The general approach that I have, there are generally 4 areas that I ask my clients to think about, in the good and in the bad times. Okay. If they're alive, are you alive, or what happens if you're not?
Good.
Yeah. Is your health going to be good, or not so good? How's the economy working for you right now or in the future? And how's your income? Great income or not so? So if you actually are thinking about those 4 elements, you can think about if everything is going just perfectly and you have the life of your dream, we can plan for that. But why not also plan for the worst case scenario and prepare ahead of time if that happens, which I hope it doesn't happen. But if it did, what I tell my clients, you will have, I call it really, buckets of money in the appropriate place for the things that might happen, so that you have the peace of mind that you're protected, even against the worst possible case scenario. If you're prepared, you live a life. And I know that actually will reduce stress and increase people's health generally, tend to have live a longer life and a more enjoyable life. So that's ultimately what they can think. If they start wrapping their mind around those 4 elements, then the rest, okay, now how do we get there? How do we put the pieces and the steps of the plan in place, knowing where you are, so that you can be prepared? And then communicate with your family members and engage around a team of professional, whether that's an attorney or whether it's a financial professional, resources around you, family member, so they are also aware of what your goals are and what the potential situations can be in the future, and they can help you get there.
Great.
That's my suggestion. People don't do their own tooth drilling if they're not dentists. And even if they are, they won't do their own tooth drilling.
Yeah.
No.
But if they don't engage with a professional, they might end up drilling the wrong tooth.
Yeah.
So that's why it says you need someone to walk along with you and help you, because they're expert and they help others. So awareness, education, planning, and the right team around you is what I ask people to at least think about it.
I think that's really good advice. You know, we like to think that the people in the Pentagon are wargaming what would happen if, and I think that's really wise thing to do. I have a friend of mine who we've played ball together for a long time. He's a little bit older than I am, but he was hiking and fell and broke his neck.
Ooh.
So it's just like he didn't expect that, and he's struggling with that and trying to get back. But it's really a big deal, and everybody has situations like that they know of. They're rare, but yeah, it's a good idea to think, well, what if that was me? How would I deal with that? And am I prepared? And have I got my family set up to where I'd like them to be so that they can maneuver through that? So I think that's really good advice.
Great.
I think in general, financial plan or any plan is like a home. The home starts with the foundation. No one talks about the foundation. They talk about the caveman and the swimming pool and the attic. The foundation is gray, is ugly. No one look at it. But if you have cracks in the foundation, the money from the swimming pool are going to go into the foundation, so the house will collapse. So preparing for the worst case, then you can start building all your floor 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth, because you know you're building on a strong place. That to me is the most important thing.
Excellent analogy. I like that a lot. Mark?
The only thing I would add to the conversation right now is communicate. You cannot over-communicate this. It's not a possibility. You may have a child that just doesn't want to hear it. We've been there. I've had mom leave the room in tears. I've had the kids leave the room in tears because it takes a little bit of courage to talk about these things. I've decided that estate planning, I think planning overall is an act of courage and an act of love, right? It takes, you're motivated by love, but it takes courage then to have that conversation. We've talked about this. It doesn't have to be in depth the first time, but it needs to keep happening. And everybody needs to be involved. So if there's a sister that's willing to jump in, that's awesome. She doesn't need judgment. She needs help, right? She needs support.
Right.
And the only way you get there is to communicate. And not all families are created equal there as far as that ability to communicate. So being clear, put together the plan, and then you don't have to pull everything out every time you visit, but review it as you talk about it.
You know, one of the other things I think that people typically think about when they think about communicating is they think about talking.
Oh, yeah.
And what is so important for everybody to realize is that really a much bigger part of communicating is listening. So yes, we have to do both, but to ask good questions and then to listen to the answers. What do people want? What are their needs? And to be able to reflect back what you heard. So, the holidays come up, and I usually send out a holiday letter that talks specifically about this topic. This is a great time to start the topic because everybody's together and we're around the table for the whole Thanksgiving meal. And when we're eating, we're somehow a little bit more at peace and able to have some of these conversations. So it's a good time to start them. It's a good time to have refreshers. Like you said, we don't have to do it all the time, but to talk about being planful and to, and I think the other thing that's important here is it's not always just about the parents, because we don't know where life is going to go for any of us. Unfortunately, your friend fell and broke his neck. Things can happen to any of us at any age in life. And so to be mindful about sharing what's important to us as well. And that everybody have that conversation jointly so that it becomes more commonplace, that younger kids aren't afraid to talk about it. We know, death is a part of what is in sight for all of us at some point in time, where none of us are invincible. So I like to tell, as I used to tell my mom, talking about it is not going to make it happen. So talking about alternatives doesn't make it happen, but it makes us prepared for it and better able to have those conversations. Well, Mark, any other words that you'd like to
From my standpoint,
at all just about today
thank you,
before we
thank you,
wrap
thank
up?
you. I thought this was a great discussion. Thank you very much. I appreciate you all three of you experts being on with us today. All I can say is this was good stuff. And a reminder that if you didn't catch us live, if you're not watching right now, at some point we'll have this up on the web on our web page, and you can come back and watch it. And I really think that would be worthwhile, and not because I was on the panel, but we had some really good stuff today. And again, thank you, thank you, thank you.